Hayate made his way down the tower stairs and thought about what to do. He was sure that Naruto was going to be in a bad mood, so he should do something for him. Walking down the streets, he nodded at the few people that said hello and made his way towards the one place he knew would cheer up Naruto. At the end of the street was a large ramen stand. It was a small building with blue banners with the name written across it hanging down before the entrance way. He slid the door open and noticed no one was inside yet, so he walked to the counter and sat at one of the stools. "Welcome back, Hayate-san. How are you?" Hayate looked up to see a young woman walking from the back to him. This was a Yame, daughter of the store owner and one of the few people in the village who liked Naruto. She was a slender girl with long, brown hair and coal eyes, with fair skin. She wears a white robe with the sleeves folded, a sort of dark blue apron with ribbon ties at the top and a bright white bandana. "I'm all right, Ayame. I was hoping to get an order to go." Ayame smiled and reached into her apron to pull out a small notebook. "Of course, what will you have? Can I get 2 chicken, 5 miso, 3 beef and a pork ramen please?" Ayame nodded as she scribbled down all of the orders. "I take it Naruto-kun is hungry today." She had a smile on her face as she thought about the young blonde. Every time he came here he always treated her like a big sister, and she was happy for it since she was an only child and her mother had died when she was young. Hayate, however, sighed when she said that. "I'm not sure. He's not in the best mood right now and I'm hoping some ramen will help." "What happened?" She lowered the pad to the counter and looked at Hayate with a worried look. "He found out about his burden," he said between coughs. She let out a gasp and brought her hand to her mouth. "Is he alright?" "How did it happen? Who told him?" "I think he's fine. He discovered it on his own and went to talk to the Hokage. By the time I got there he was in the middle of talking and I waited outside. Afterwards he left. I figured I would get him some ramen for lunch." Ayame nodded and calmed down some. She ripped the paper from the pad and stuck it on the little window leading to the back. "Dad, big order." A face popped into the window and smiled at Hayate. "Ah, Hayate-san, good to see you. Where's young Naruto?" The man was Tuki, owner of Ichiraku Ramen and father of Ayame. Tuki was an older man with tan wrinkled skin. He wore a small hat covering his graying hair. "He's out and about, Tuki. I was just telling Ayame that he figured out about his tenant today, so I'm hoping ramen will cheer him up some." He let out a sigh as he finished, wondering how many times he would have to tell this story today. "Well, that's not good. How did it happen?" The man had walked around from the back and leaned against the counter. "Somehow he figured it out on his own and went to the Hokage about it." "Well, you let us know if there is anything we can do for him, alright?" Tuki turned around and headed back to the kitchen to begin making the orders. "Will do. Uzumaki compound A lone Anbu appeared in front of the Uzumaki compound gates and walked towards them. Word had spread quickly through the Anbu ranks that Naruto had been in the Hokage office and now knew of his burden. Neiko had been one of the first told. Everyone knew of her relationship with Naruto, and immediately she sped off to check on him. Reaching the gate, she pushed on it to find it sealed shut. Ever since he started school, Naruto had learned to use the security seals and thus they were always locked from anyone but Naruto if closed. She reached over to the intercom they had installed years ago and pushed the button. "Naruto, it's Neiko. Are you there?" She waited for a few seconds before she pushed the button again. "Come on, Naruto. I know you're in there." Again she waited a few seconds before pushing it again. "Please let me in, Naruto." After a few seconds a glowing seal appeared on the door. After it faded the doors opened slightly and she pushed them open. She walked up the path to the front door and walked inside. Taking off her sandals at the front, she looked around to see no one there. She slowly walked into the hall, making her way towards the library to see if Naruto was in there, but again she found no one. Figuring he was in his room, she turned and walked to the end of the hall and looked at his door to see it slightly ajar. She quietly pushed it open and saw that the lights were off. Taking a second to let her eyes adjust to the dimly lit room, she saw Naruto curled up on his bed and walked across the room to him. She sat down on the bed with his back facing her and gentle started to rub his back. Are you okay? He simply nodded his head but scooted back some so she was closer to him. They sat in silence for a while. The only noise was the occasional sniffle from Naruto. She assumed he had been crying. Hey Naruto, you home? Neiko stopped and turned to the door after hearing a male voice. She ruffled Naruto's hair and got up from the bed to see who was here. She made her way down the hall to the living room but did not see anyone. She turned and looked into the kitchen and found Hayate unloading containers from a box. For once she was glad she had to wear her mask at all times. Hayate was the best swordsman in the village after Kushina died, and while she wouldn't say she was a fangirl, Neiko had a crush on the man. She knew he was watching over Naruto but she had yet to ever come in contact with the man because of her busy Anbu schedule. She was lost in thought as Hayate turned and saw her. Ah, Neiko-san, hello, come to check on Naruto. He smiled at her and she felt her cheeks burn slightly. Yes. I heard about what happened earlier and wanted to check on him. She was mentally berating herself for getting tongue-tied. How is he? Hayate was wondering why she seemed nervous and was worried it had to do with Naruto. I'm not sure, he wasn't speaking and is just lying in his room in the dark. She decided not to mention Naruto might have been crying. Well, hopefully some ramen will cheer him up. He smiled and took one of the containers with him as he started to head towards Naruto's room. He saw Naruto on the bed, his back still facing the door, and knocked on the door to let his presence be known. Hey Naruto, are you hungry? Ayame and Tuki sent over some ramen for you. He popped open the container, knowing Naruto had a strong sense of smell, and waved the aroma towards him. Hayate smiled when he saw Naruto stiffen and heard the boy sniffing the air. After a minute he rolled over and stood up from the bed and quietly walked past the two, getting small smiles from both, and into the kitchen. Hayate and Neiko followed him and sat around the counter in the kitchen watching Naruto slowly eat his meals. Both were worried about the blonde. It was odd to see him so sad and depressed. Hayate let out a sigh, stood up from his seat and walked around the counter towards Naruto. The boy was so lost in his own world that he didn't notice Hayate walking towards him from behind. Neiko watched in confusion as Hayate stood behind Naruto and suddenly popped him in the head. Ow! What the hell? Naruto dropped his fork and grabbed his head in pain. Hayate began to chuckle and Neiko smiled under her mask. So you can speak in here? I thought you had gone mute. Hayate chuckled as Naruto glared at him. Why did you hit me? His voice was full of anger and frustration. Because you need to let out your emotions and not bottle them up. We're here to help you, not sit around watching you mope like a baby. Hayate crossed his arms and stared down at Naruto. Well, excuse me for learning I have a fucking demon in my gut today and being upset about it. He started to turn around when Hayate grabbed his shoulder. And I'm sorry for that, but you need to vent these feelings and not hold them in. He lifted Naruto by his shirt and carried the blonde outside, kicking and struggling to break free. Let me go, Hayate. Come on, this isn't funny. Despite his plea, Hayate held strong and brought Naruto outside with him to the training area. Neiko followed behind, both amused and worried about the tactic. Hayate finally reached the training area and tossed Naruto down on the far end and stood in a relaxed stance facing the boy. Naruto was angry at how Hayate had just manhandled him, so as soon as he landed he quickly rose up and faced Hayate. He saw how relaxed the shinobi was and charged at him full speed. When he got in range he quickly started to throw a combination of punches trying to hit the man, but Hayate easily dodged the assault. For several minutes Naruto kept his assault going, throwing strike after strike just trying to hit him at all. Neiko watched from the sidelines and shook her head at the scene. Eventually Naruto dropped to his knees, sweaty and gasping for breath, as Hayate walked over to him and kneeled down. Feeling better? Naruto nodded and fell back so he was staring up into the sky. Sorry. Hayate chuckled as he stood up and walked towards the house. It's all right, just get back to your normal self soon, kid. Neiko walked over and squatted down next to the boy. You okay, Naruto-kun? Yes, Neiko-ne-chan, I was just upset about learning everything so fast, I just had to clear my head. He sat up and gave her a kind smile. She reached over and gave the boy a hug before she got up and turned towards the house. Well, good, I need to go back to work, but I'll see you later, okay? After receiving a nod, she disappeared in a swirl of leaves. Naruto took a breath and let out a sigh. He stood up and brushed off all of the dirt on his clothes before walking back into the house and looking up at the clock. He had told Sasuke he would come over at 2 and it was a few minutes till, so he grabbed his sandals and headed towards the Uchiha compound. He soon got to the compound and waved at the 2 gate guards, getting a nod in return, before making his way to the main house. He always enjoyed going to the Uchiha compound because no many of the clan members looked at him harshly. While everyone wasn't friendly, they didn't give him the glares the villagers did. He shrugged it off and made his way up the walkway to Sasuke's house and knocked on the door. Soon it opened to reveal Makoto. "Hello Naruto-kun, here to see Sasuke." She smiled sweetly at him as he nodded his head and she moved out of the doorway. "Well, he's in the back working with Itachi, go on out." Naruto gave her a smile and made his way through the house and out the back door towards the training area in the back. The Uchiha training area was different from his own. Where his was a large open area surrounded by trees, theirs had a large lake on one side and wasn't as clear. Naruto and Sasuke liked to take turns training together in the different fields so they could get used to different environments. As he got closer, he heard the thumps of kunai sinking into wood and came upon the scene of Sasuke and his brother practicing throwing kunai. Itachi noticed Naruto and waved slightly. He was a young man with onyx eyes, and jet black hair that was pulled back with a red band in a low ponytail which extended to his shoulder blades. His clothes consisted of a black shirt with the Uchiha clan symbol on the back with bandages around his ankles and black sandals. He also wore tan pants with a weapons pouch strapped to his back. Naruto knew that he was an Anbu member, but just as he didn't know Neko's real name, he had no idea what mask Itachi wore. Itachi was always kind to Naruto and was happy that his brother had finally found a friend. Ever since Naruto and Sasuke had become friends, Itachi had made more of an effort to help the two with their training. As Naruto got closer, Sasuke became aware of his presence and waved to the blonde. "Hey, thought you had forgotten." He grinned when Naruto rolled his eyes. "I forget to come over one time and you keep bringing it up, geez." The two chuckled as Naruto stopped next to Sasuke and looked over at the targets. The targets were not the normal circular targets but ones shaped like the human body standing straight up with arms down at the side. The two had been able to hit the bullseye on normal targets for a while now, and Itachi had decided to teach them to hit vital areas on a person. "It keeps you humble." Naruto rolled his eyes again and looked to the training field. "Well, we going to train or you going to waste my time?" He smiled at Sasuke as the raven-haired boy grinned back. "You seem eager for me to beat you into the ground. Please, we both know you only win when I don't use my kenjutsu." Sasuke couldn't argue with that fact. While he and Naruto had been training for around the same amount of time, the types of training gave them different strengths. Naruto was the stronger than Sasuke but lacked a real taijutsu style, so Sasuke usually dominated the battles. However, when Naruto would use his Bakken, Sasuke couldn't handle the weapon and usually was on the losing end. "Whatever, Whiskers," Sasuke smirked as he walked past his friend. While they were friends, the two usually teased each other for the fun of it. A tick mark appeared over Naruto's eye at the name but turned into a fox-like grin as he turned to face his friend. "Bring it on, duck butt," he taunted, referring to Sasuke's hairstyle and earning him a glare from the boy. With a growl, he launched himself at his blonde friend and the two began to wrestle around on the ground, earning a small smile from Itachi as he watched the boy's antics. Hokage office Hiruzen puffed on his pipe as he looked at the three figures in front of him. He had called Danzo, Kaharu and Homura to his office not long after Naruto had left to speak with them. "I have called you three to let you know Naruto has learned about his tenant." He noted that all three, including Danzo to his surprise, raised an eyebrow and looked slightly shocked. Kaharu was the first to recover and gain her composure. "How did this happen? I thought we agreed you would tell him when we thought he was ready." Her words and expression showed that she thought Hiruzen had somehow informed the boy because of their relationship. "We did, but it seems we did not account for the boy's intelligence." After the Mizuki incident he grew more suspicious and figured everything out on his own. Kaharu looked surprised again but Danzo and Homura kept a straight face. What was the boy's reaction? Danzo asked while trying to keep from seeming too interested. To be blunt, he is upset with people's reactions. While I don't believe we need to fear him running around killing villagers or fleeing Konoha, I think it will take a lot before the civilians and he get along. The elders didn't look happy about the end comment but Danzo nodded with the statement. Understandable. What of the beast itself? He made no comment of it. I will give him time to adjust to the information and have Hayate watching over him to see if there is any change in his behavior. The three elders nodded. While we are here, there is something I think we should discuss in private. Hiruzen. Danzo looked to the corner of the room with his remaining eye, showing he knew of the hidden Anbu. Anbu, give us the room please. Two figures emerged from the shadows and made their way out of the room again. As they closed the door, Hiruzen leaned back into his chair and looked at his three advisors waiting for one of them to begin. We are worried about the Uchiha Hiruzen. They are growing even more suspicious. Danzo spoke softly, almost in a whisper as if someone might overhear him. I understand your concern but I assure you I have it under control. The trio exchanged concerned looks but said nothing to each other when Danzo nodded. Very well Hiruzen, but I still think something needs to be done before they decide to act. He turned after he finished and walked out the door with Kaharu and Homura in tow. Hiruzen let out a sigh as they left. He knew that if he didn't solve the situation with the Uchiha soon that it would cause problems. The only thing was how to solve it. Underneath Konoha Danzo walked into the underground compound of Root and was flanked by Tiger immediately. He was in thought on how to handle the situation with the Uchiha. He knew the clan was becoming a threat to Konoha but the Sharingan was too useful to lose. He made it to his office and sat back in his seat looking up at Tiger, having finally when he made a decision. Get me Itachi. Tiger nodded and left the office quickly. After a few seconds he snapped his fingers and a blank masked Root member appeared in the room. Hi Danzo-sama. Have two retrieval teams ready for an operation. I will explain more in detail later. The agent nodded and was gone as soon as he appeared. Danzo leaned back and drummed his fingers on his desk as he finalized his thoughts, a grin spreading across his face as he did. Konoha. 1 week later Naruto stood amongst the other shinobi of the village at Konoha's graveyard in his black outfit. Everyone was wearing the same thing too. To his side were all of the clan heads and some of their children. Naruto guessed they were all here because Sasuke was in their class, seeing as he didn't really hang out with any of them. He looked over at his friend, standing next to the Hokage and the village elders. The very same day Naruto had learned of his tenant Sasuke's entire family had been killed. Not only that, but apparently the killer was Sasuke's own brother Itachi. Itachi had been watching them train in the field when suddenly he said he had to take care of something. Not thinking anything of it, Naruto and Sasuke continued on. After a couple of hours Itachi came back holding a bag of clothes. He told them that Sasuke's parents were going out to a dinner and they wanted Sasuke to stay at Naruto's since they did not know when they would get home. Itachi offered to take them to eat dinner before he dropped them off. Of course the boys thought nothing of it and simply went along with the offer. The next morning Hiruzen and a team of Anbu showed up to Naruto's house and informed them of what had happened. Sasuke immediately ran towards his house not believing any of it, and that was the last time Naruto saw him before today. The ceremony was very nice in Naruto's opinion and he stood to the side afterwards waiting for all of the civilians to finish talking, or sucking up in his opinion, to Sasuke. Soon the only people left in the cemetery were Naruto, Sasuke, Hayate and Hiruzen, so Naruto walked over and stood next to Sasuke as he looked at his parents' headstones. Neither of them said a word, they just stood there looking at the graves. Why did he do this, Naruto? Sasuke's voice was quiet and sounded as if he was on the verge of tears. I don't know. Why me? He sent me away with you, he had to have planned that, but why? Naruto watched as Sasuke clenched his fists in anger and began to shake. He put his hand on his friend's shoulder. I don't know Sasuke, but I promise you we will find out. Sasuke turned and looked at Naruto. What surprised the blonde was that his normal black eyes were gone. Now he was staring into red eyes with a black iris and small broken black ring around it and a single tome on it. Sharingan, Naruto whispered as he stared wide-eyed at his friend. Sasuke grinned not only at Naruto's reaction but also at his words. Naruto snapped out of his surprise and looked at Sasuke with a serious face. I owe it to your parents to help you. Sasuke nodded and turned back to the graves. He and Naruto stood there until the sun started to set over the Hokage monument. Two years later Naruto walked towards the academy whistling as he passed by the villagers, completely ignoring the small glares and looks from them and mental making a note of who they were. Since discovering about his tenant he made mental notes on how many and who treated him like the demon itself so that eventually if anyone needs something from him he wouldn't go easy on them. He had grown in the last few years thanks to his training. He now stood at 5 feet 3 inches shorter than only 4 other boys in his class and was muscular for a 12-year-old boy. His outfit had changed slightly over the years also. He now wore a 3/4 sleeve navy blue shirt that ended just below his elbows, with a red Uzumaki crest on the back, a pair of black Anbu pants and black sandals. Ever since the Uchiha massacre, Sasuke had thrown him into training to get strong enough to defeat his brother and make him pay for what he did to their family. Naruto trained just as hard so that he could keep up with his friend, but also he saw it as a kinship for he and Sasuke. The two were now both the last of their clans. They viewed Itachi as dead. His Fuinjutsu was at a level that he was the best Fuinjutsu user in the village and, according to his Jiji, very close to the level of Jiraiya of the Sannin. Naruto assumed he just seemed that way because of the amount of seals that he now possessed, but took the compliment all the same. He also had made great leaps in his Kenjutsu training. The Uzumaki style was made up of several different attacks. He had mastered a few of the simple ones and was very skilled with several more. He was now able to press Hayate to use some of his own techniques. A smile went across his face when he thought of Hayate. The man had become much like a brother to him in the last few years. He was also glad that Hayate was now dating Neko, who he had finally learned was named Yugao Azuki. Of course, how he found out wasn't the best. Hayate had invited her over one night thinking Naruto was at Sasuke's when really he was studying in the library. The two started getting intimate almost as soon as she walked in the door, and when Naruto walked out to get something to drink he paused and saw the two naked on the living room couch. At first Naruto was just embarrassed to have walked in on them, but when Yugao had screeched, "Naruto-kun," at him while they covered themselves and he saw her hair color, it registered in his mind. He blushed and ran from the room. After they got clothed she came into his room and talked to him about their relationship, how he couldn't tell anyone about her Anbu identity and, much to his dismay, the sex talk. Needless to say he couldn't look either of them in the face for a week. Shaking the thoughts of her naked body from his mind, stupid hormones, Naruto entered the academy and walked over to his normal seat and pulled out the first of his ninjutsu scrolls. His training had progressed enough that he could start going over the scroll and he was excited. Sasuke had been training mostly in taijutsu and ninjutsu in his time and he was jealous of watching him shoot fireballs from his mouth while he couldn't do anything. It's not like he thought he would be doing things like that right off the bat, but he hoped soon he could. Sasuke had also changed since the massacre, and not all for the better in Naruto's opinion. Suddenly losing his parents had made him more withdrawn from everyone. Now that he was the clan heir and sole Uchiha, people were always trying to get on his good side and praised him. While Sasuke at first didn't mind the praise, he soon grew annoyed with it, and after he saw how people ignored Naruto when with him or even insulted him when he wasn't around, he was appealed by them. Naruto had decided to tell Sasuke about the Kyuubi. After learning about that, Sasuke took it better than Naruto thought, and after a small explanation about sealing and answering some questions he never brought it up again. That had lifted a weight off of Naruto and only made them closer. Sasuke also grew annoyed with all of the fangirls. Before, most of the girls thought he was attractive and liked him, but now parents were pushing their girls to date him so they could gain influence and power from his name. Naruto found this absolutely hilarious and made it his life goal to increase the misfortune of his friend any way he could, like telling girls what he liked, even if it was a lie, or give out locations he was going to be in. While Sasuke hated Naruto when he did things like that, secretly he was happy that his friend kept him sane. If left alone, he would start remembering his family and how Itachi took them away. Naruto's hijinks took his mind away from all of that and he was happy for it. Naruto let out a sigh and cracked open the scroll he had and began looking through it, and his eyes widened when he read what it was. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Shadow clones are a technique given to the Uzamakis from our cousins the Senju as an offering of friendship to their new village Konohagakure. They are the pinnacle of all the clone techniques and one that should be practiced with extreme caution. Many people do not learn this technique until later in their lives because of the chakra requirements, but we Uzumaki have higher reserves than most. The shadow clone is a clone that has form to it and unlike others is able to interact. Even censors and dojutsu users are unable to tell the differences between shadow clones and actual people. The clones also send all information they learn back to the others when they dispel. This gives advantages for spy missions. The disadvantages to shadow clones are that you divide your chakra between all of the ones you create. Meaning if you create 4 clones, your chakra will be at a fifth of what it normally is. Also, if you dispel too many clones at once, you can cause severe brain damage from gaining too many memories at once. It is advised to dispel them in intervals. Naruto stared at the page and couldn't believe what he was reading. If this was true, he had just found a gold mine of a technique. He quickly rolled up the scroll and resealed it so no one would see it and ask him about it. He was going to wait until he was alone at home to practice it. Sasuke would definitely want to learn this technique, but he knew that Sasuke's chakra levels were nowhere near his. Sasuke had high reserves for a student, probably better than most genin, but Naruto knew his levels were already at mid to high Junin level. He would have to learn the technique and master the hand seals so he could get it down to only a few so Sasuke wouldn't copy them and then try to use a skill he couldn't handle. It had already happened a few times since Sasuke had gained his Sharingan and the boy ended up in the hospital for chakra exhaustion. He had been better in the past few months about taking it easy, but Naruto feared this would be a tipping point and didn't want to tempt Sasuke. "Good morning, Naruto-kun," a small voice said, and Naruto looked up to see Hinata sitting in her seat across from him. She was one of the few people he actually likes in the class, while she was very nice and friendly. Her only problem was she was shy and didn't have a lot of self-esteem, so she was an easy target for many of the other girls in the class. Naruto looked over and saw that Shino was again sitting next to her. He didn't know why, but Shino had seemed to take over the role of Hinata's guardian. Anytime someone made fun of her or put her down, they would be covered in bugs. Naruto found it hilarious, especially when it was some of Sasuke's fangirls. "Morning, Hinata-chan." Shino, the shade-wearing student, gave him a small nod at the greeting and went back to staring forward. Another of Naruto's favorite things to do in class was to see how many words he could get Shino to say in a day. Sadly, the number to beat wasn't as high as one would think. He noticed Sasuke walk in at that point and gave the boy a mock salute. "Morning, Captain Emo, sir." Sasuke let out a sigh and rolled his eyes at his friend. "Haven't you used that joke before?" "Probably, but you have to love the classics." Sasuke rolled his eyes again and sat down next to Naruto in his normal seat and began looking out the window. Naruto shrugged at the sudden loss of conversation and decided to observe those around the room until class started. A few minutes before class, he perked up as a noise came from the hallway. It was quiet at first, but soon voices and words could be heard and the door burst open as Sakura and Ino burst into the room. "I win, Ino pig," Sakura stated with triumph as she tried to catch her breath. "In your dream, forehead." Ino tried to act just as victories, but both were out of breath and struggled to stay upright. Both soon turned their attention to the far end of the room and let out a groan. The girls were two of Sasuke's biggest fangirls, and every day they attempted to race to the school and get the spot next to their idol, but every day they were beat by Naruto. At first they had tried to bull Naruto into giving up the seat, but when Sakura attempted to hit him, Sasuke grabbed her arm and said that if anyone messed with Naruto they were messing with him too. That comment brought about a small change in the girls of the class, where they were at first mean to Naruto, now they were all sucking up to him to get info and closer to Sasuke. Naruto had dubbed the girls the Twin Terrors because even though they weren't friends they worked together to keep the other woman at bay. Naruto looked over at Sasuke to see him roll his eyes at the girls and an evil grin spread across his face and he leaned forward to Sasuke. Wonder what would happen if they knew you were eligible for the CRA. Naruto chuckled as he watched the color drain from Sasuke's face and turned to Naruto. Why you wouldn't dare. If Sasuke feared one thing it was his fangirls leaning of the clan restoration act. As of now they all tried to tear each other apart so they would be the only one to get him, but if they knew he could have multiple wives they might band together and make his life hell. He and Naruto had recently been told about it by the clan elders. While they didn't have to worry about it until they became genin, the elders thought it a good idea they knew in advance. Naruto burst out laughing at Sasuke's reaction and almost fell to the ground but stopped when Iruka walked in the door. Alright, quiet down everyone. Sakura, Ino, get to your seats. The girls nodded and rushed to the desk behind Naruto and Sasuke. Alright everyone, seeing as this is your last year we're going to start with learning the Bunshin no Jutsu. It along with the Henge and Kawarimi are important for all genin to learn. While everyone else was excited, Naruto had a small grin on his face. He would leave the easy one to his classmates while he learned the shadow clone. Naruto stood in his backyard facing his opponent. His new katana hung on his left hip. The sheath was all black with a flat finish so it would not shine in the light. If one inspected it closely they would see seals carved into the wood. He had looked up seals in his library that would make the sheath more durable and keep it protected against the elements. The guard was a dark gray that was made to look like the Uzumaki crest, with a handle wrapped in a dark red cloth. Across from him stood a shadow clone of Hayate. In the last year Hayate had decided Naruto needed to prepare for the shinobi life, so he always used a clone so Naruto could go all out and not fear using killing blows. The real Hayate stood on the side leaning against a tree watching the two stare each other down. A small smile graced his face as he thought of the past year's training. Naruto had shown a great deal of skill in Kenjutsu and with his family's style, even he admitted that he didn't have as much skill at Naruto's age as the blonde. He pushed off the tree and walked between Naruto and his clone. You ready, Naruto? He looked over to the blonde and watched as he drew his blade from the sheath and nodded at Hayate. He held the blade to his side and crouched down, putting his right foot forward. Hayate turned to his clone and received a nod as it drew its own katana and stood at the ready for Naruto's assault. Hayate held up one of his arms. Hajime, Hayate brought his arm down and jumped back as his clone speed towards Naruto. Its eyes widened as it watched Naruto start to fall forward. It remembered this technique and quickly put its sword down and horizontal to its body. Purple lightning flash. Naruto speed forward with a speed Hayate would judge typical for a low-level chunin. His body was barely above the ground as he raced towards the clone, swinging his katana and slashing upwards towards the clone's torso. He cursed silently when his blade connected with the clone's and quickly leapt to the side to avoid the counter-attack. Naruto took a defensive stance and thought out his next move. The clone moved in and started going through a series of easy attacks to keep Naruto from thinking. Hayate watched Naruto from the side to get a better judge of Naruto's increase in skill in the last year. While they had dueled together, Hayate had left Naruto on his own to perfect his skills. The two continued to dance around the training ground for several minutes, trading blows and dodging attacks. Naruto seemed to hold his own but was having trouble getting the edge on the clone. Naruto grit his teeth. Even though it was a clone, it was still a mid to high level chunin. He decided to try one of his new moves, even though he had yet to perfect it. He jumped back to make room between him and the clone and raised his katana above his head and dashed at the clone, bringing his blade down. Hayate raised his eyebrow at the move but waited. He knew it wasn't that simple. The clone brought up his blade to block the blow and was prepared to counter. Imperial Wrath. Quicker than the clone or Hayate could notice, Naruto switched the positions of his hands and changed the katana's trajectory, letting it slip right past the clone's blade. He slowly sheathed his katana as the clone disappeared in a poof of smoke and the katana fell to the ground. Naruto heard clapping and turned to see Hayate walking towards him with a smile on his face. Well done, Naruto. I must say I'm very impressed with that last attack. He reached down and collected his blade. I'm curious as to how you broke through the guard. But that would be telling sensei. Naruto gave him a sly grin and started towards the house, chuckling as he heard Hayate mumbling about stubborn students. The two made their way into the house and Naruto immediately got into the shower to clean up before he needed to head to the academy. Today was the day of the final exam and he was more than ready to get it over with. The last year had been the most boring of all of them. Every day in class was spent going over all of the previous years and physical education to ensure they were all physically fit for duty if they graduated. He chuckled to himself as he stepped into the shower. He didn't understand how that the girls in his class were going to become shinobi. Throughout the year their infatuation with Sasuke had grown and all of them spent their time dieting and trying to look their best for him. He was amazed that any of them had the physical capabilities to actually graduate from the academy. He shook his head as he turned the shower off and began to dry off. It wasn't his job to worry about them. He walked into his room and pulled on his clothes before heading into the kitchen for a quick breakfast. He walked in to see Hayate already eating and Yugao walking about preparing food. Morning Yugao Nichan. He smiled and gave her a small wave as he sat down. Good morning Naruto-kun. She smiled back at him and started piling some food onto a plate for him and placed it down in front of him. Are you ready for your final exam? Yup. He replied happily as he began digging into his food. Good. I'm sure you will pass it with flying colors. She sat down with her plate and the three fell into a comfortable silence as they finished their meals. Soon Naruto was done and he jumped up from his seat and headed for the front door. Bye Hayate, Ne-chan. Next time I see you I'll be a shinobi. He missed the grins on their faces as he went around the corner and put on his sandals. Once outside he ran towards the front door but instead of going through the door he ran straight up the wall and jumped into a tree from the top. Naruto had learned to use his chakra to help him climb objects a few months ago from one of his scrolls. The exercise not only helped with training his chakra control but also opened new paths for fighting. He chuckled when he remembered the first time he had used it against Sasuke. The Uchiha and he were sparring and Naruto was pushed back towards a tree and would normally have been trapped but he leapt onto it as Sasuke went to kick him. Sasuke was so surprised to see Naruto standing on the side of the tree he didn't focus and Naruto knocked him out. Of course once he came to Sasuke bugged him to teach him how to do it too. Soon Naruto made it to the edge of the forest hiding his house and dropped down from the trees and walked through the village. While he didn't care what the villagers though anymore he decided to hide all of his skill from the villagers until he needed to. He had already slowly begun his revenge against the merchants of the village. His skill with Fuinjutsu was unknown to everyone but a select few and he used it to his financial advantage. He had discovered he could make a large amount of shadow clones at a time and used that to create dozens of seals a day then sold them under a fake name to the merchants of the village. He mental smirked when he thought of how the village would react if they found out the demon was the one supplying seals that protected them. He was broken from his thoughts as a black and blue blur ran by him. Blinking he noticed the back of the figure and saw the Uchiha symbol. Sasuke. He said confused as he watched his friend run down the street away from the academy. Soon he heard squeals and turned to see a large dust cloud coming towards him. Sasuke-kun. He heard from multiple voices and realized Sasuke was running from his fan club, again. As they ran past him Naruto noticed that Ino and Sakura were at the head of the pack and shook his head at his classmates. When will any of them learn? He sighed and headed back up the way they all came to get to class. He knew Sasuke was leading them in a circle and would be back just in time for the start of class. He had the routine down to a science after running from them for so long. Shaking his head with a sigh Naruto he walked through the academy doors and down the hall to his classroom. When he entered he noticed more people than usual and figured everyone was excited about the final exam and wanted to make sure they were on time. Hey Naruto, the blonde looked up and saw Kiba waving at him from his seat, ready to become shinobi. Of course, I've been studying all year for this. Unlike some people, Naruto smirked at the last part and Kiba let out a growl. What's studying got to do with being a shinobi anyway? A book's not going to do much good when someone is throwing kunai at me. Kiba sneered as he looked away from Naruto, slightly embarrassed by his low academic grade. Naruto chuckled and walked up to his normal seat and leaned back in the chair as he waited for Iruka. Soon the door opened and Sasuke walked into the room, sweaty and slightly out of breath. The rest of the boys all smirked at him, knowing full well what happened to him as he walked up to his seat next to Naruto. How was your morning jog? He chuckled as Sasuke glared at him, then stared out at the window. Moments after he walked in, Sasuke's fan club came in the room. Surprisingly, they didn't look as tired as Sasuke. Naruto figured they all stopped after a while to clean up to look good for their crush. The girls all filed in and took their normal seats as they gave Sasuke looks of lust but were broken from their thoughts as Iruka walked into the class. Good morning, class, he said as he placed a large stack of papers on his desk and turned to face them. Good morning, Iruka-sensei. Now then, I'm sure you are all excited, so I will skip any long speeches and get to the test. He watched as many of the students wiggled nervously in their seats before he continued. The exam is made up of 3 parts, a written exam, physical test and finally a ninjutsu test. Are there any questions? Looking around the room, he didn't see anyone rise. Very well. Please remove everything from your desks. He picked up the papers as the students cleared their desks and began passing them out to each desk, being careful to make sure none of the student had any hidden cheat sheets. After all of the students had an exam, he returned to his desk and sat behind it, keeping his eyes moving to ensure that no one was cheating. The test was well put together in Naruto's opinion. I went over information they had learned from the first day of the academy to current things they learned just last week. Naruto had an easy enough time with the questions, and after around 30 minutes he finished the exam, only losing to Shino, Shikamaru and Sakura. He flipped his test over and tried not to look around the room at who was left. While he knew Iruka was friendlier to him after the Mizuki incident, he didn't want to risk failing for cheating. He didn't have to wait much longer before the final student, Kiba, turned their test over. Okay, everyone seems to be done, so will you all please go out and begin stretching for the physical part of the exam while I collect your tests. The students all nodded and made their way out of the class in a small mod. Naruto and Sasuke stayed seated for a minute before getting up and following behind everyone. So what was your opinion of the test? Asked the blonde in a small voice so not to be overheard. Not too hard, I'll admit some of the questions got me, Sasuke said with a slight scowl. He didn't like to sound weak at something. I'm guessing the history questions. You always zoned out during those lessons, his friend said with a small chuckle, getting a small shove from the Uchiha. Like you always paid attention. Naruto turned his head and scratched the back of his head. Sasuke chuckled lightly as they made their way outside and walked slightly away from the group to begin stretching. Sasuke could feel the eyes of all the females in class on him as he began to stretch out his muscles. He rolled his eyes as he thought about them and wished they would leave him alone and take being a shinobi seriously. He wouldn't say it out loud, but he found many of the girls attractive, but their attitudes and actions kept him from wanting to do anything with them. Like many of the villagers, they were interested in his name and didn't bother to learn anything about him. Soon Iruka came outside with a clipboard and called for everyone to gather around him. Your physical exam will be 2 parts. First I will test your accuracy, then each of you will face off with me in a taijutsu match. You do not have to win, just show me what you can do. Any questions? He again received no questions, but he noticed some of the students looked worried and were whispering to each other. Alright, everyone head over to the target area. He headed the class to one side of the field where targets were located and a few tables were set up holding kunai and shuriken were laying out. 5 targets were set up across the field a few feet apart from each other and a white chalk line had been drawn across from them. One at a time picks up 5 kunai and 5 shuriken, then stand behind the white line. You will throw your kunai first, retrieve them after everyone has thrown, then repeat with the shuriken. Everyone nodded and 5 students moved to the table to pick up the equipment before moving the line. Group after group until everyone was done. Naruto and Sasuke were the only 2 able to hit the center with all 5 kunai and shuriken. After the final group, Uruka collected the weapons and placed them back on the table before moving the class to a circular ring drawn in chalk on the ground. Uruka put down his clipboard and walked into the center of the ring. Alright, one at a time, step into the ring and we will face off. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a stopwatch, then looked at all of the students before tossing it to Shikamaru. Shikamaru, please call time when it reaches 3 minutes. Troublesome. Yes, sensei. The lazy boy let out a sigh as he stood next to the ring. Uruka started to call in the students alphabetically by their last names. Naruto studied his fellow students, most of them had a decent understanding of the academy taijutsu style. The clan children showed better skill with their taijutsu, but Naruto expected that much, seeing as they had people to teach them outside of class. Sasuke even pressed Uruka to use more of his skill than against the other students and even managed to score a solid hit on Uruka's chin, getting cheers from all of the girls about how amazing he was. Naruto walked into the ring as Sasuke walked out, giving Naruto a beat that look as they crossed paths. Naruto smirked at his friend's attitude, knowing full well that he wouldn't do better than him, seeing as he focused more on kenjutsu than taijutsu. Once Uruka was ready and called out to begin, Naruto dashed forward and sent out a series of punches and kicks. Much like against Sasuke, Uruka was impressed with the boy's skill, which he rated higher than the other student. Uruka kept on the defensive like with the others, but found that Naruto was stronger than the others and decided to put some space between them to get some rest for a second. He blocked another punch to his ribs and pushed Naruto as he jumped back to gain some space, but was surprised when Naruto suddenly leapt at him. Going of pure instinct, he grabbed Naruto's collar and fell backwards, putting his foot into Naruto's stomach and flipping him out of the ring as Uruka landed on the ground. Naruto was surprised by the action and hit the ground with a thud and let out a small groan as he started to stand. Hold on, Naruto. Uruka had stood up and moved to help Naruto up. Sorry, I wasn't supposed to go on the offensive like that, but you caught me by surprise. He chuckled as he pulled Naruto up onto his feet. It's alright, sensei. Hayate says I'm unpredictable sometimes. He dusted himself off as he spoke. Uruka smiled and patted his back. Okay, well, that's enough for you, good job. Naruto smiled and walked back towards the group, and he noticed Sasuke smirking at him and shaking his head. The blonde stood next to his friend as Ino walked into the ring for her turn. You really are unpredictable sometimes. Just what were you going to do if you tackled Uruka? Sasuke said with a small amount of humor in his voice. Naruto just shrugged, not really having a plan, and was just going to go with the flow of things. He watched as Ino attempted to fight their teacher. Like many of the girls, she didn't seem that good, and Naruto shook his head. Time, sensei. Shikamaru held up the stopwatch as he spoke. Uruka and Ino stopped their fighting, the latter breathing heavily and sweating, and made their way towards the group. Thank you, Shikamaru. He took the watch from the boy and looked to the class. Let's head back into the classroom, everyone, and we will begin the ninjutsu portion of our exam. The students all looked excited as they made their way back into the classroom and took their seats. Uruka walked up to his desk and placed the stopwatch down. Okay, class 1 will have you come into the next room one by one and ask you to perform the henge, substitution and clone jutsus we have gone over. You exams have already been graded. If you received a passing grade and can perform all 3 ninjutsu, you will receive your headband. Any questions? Naruto was about to raise his hand but stopped. He wanted to ask if knowing the shadow clone would be okay, but decided to wait and ask in the exam so the whole class wouldn't know about them. He stretched his arms and leaned back in his chair as Uruka took one of the students out into the hall and closed the door. Soon the room was alive with chatter. Minutes passed as one by one Uruka came in and called the students into the next room. Naruto noticed that no one came back into the classroom after leaving. I guess that's so we don't know who passed and who failed. He shrugged as another student was called and he began looking around the room. It seemed that they were once again being called in alphabetically, and Naruto grinned before turning to Sasuke. You know, eventually it will be just me, you and Ino. He leaned in and whispered the last part and chuckled as Sasuke shivered. The Uchiha shot him a glare and Naruto smiled at him before looking back at the front of the class. It didn't take long for Naruto's statement to come true, and he was curious if Ino would actually try and talk to Sasuke with him there. He looked out the corner of his eye and saw that she was looking at Sasuke every few seconds and fiddling with her hair. Just as it looked like she was getting the courage to say something, Iruka came into the room and called Sasuke's name. "Good luck, duck butt," Naruto said with mirth in his voice. "Like I need it, whiskers," Sasuke replied with a grin and earned a small tick mark above Naruto. Soon he was out the door and Naruto looked over at a disappointed Ino. Obviously she was upset she missed a chance to have Sasuke to herself. While he didn't really know her and he could care less about the girl's obsession with Sasuke, he didn't like to see people down. "I wouldn't be upset, Ino. He was so focused on the exam I doubt he would even talk with me." The blonde girl looked up at him as he spoke and a small smile graced her face at his words. "Thanks, Naruto." He noticed her fidget and look away before she spoke again. "Say, Naruto, does Sasuke ever mention me?" Naruto let out a sigh as he thought of how to answer the question. He didn't want to be totally honest and hurt her feeling, especially before the exam. "To be honest, we don't talk a lot, Ino. We train, that's about it. Our conversations are all about how to improve ourselves." He didn't look at her while he spoke, mostly because it was a lie, and while she may not be the best at many things, he knew if she was anything like her father she would see the lie. Luckily, before she could speak anymore, Iruka stepped in and called for Naruto. He hopped up from his seat and walked out into the hall with Iruka. "This way, Naruto." The boy followed his teacher down the hall and into an empty classroom similar to their own, except the teacher's desk was by the student's desk. Iruka walked over and sat behind it, then looked up at Naruto. "Alright, Naruto. Please show me the Genjutsu." Naruto nodded and quickly transformed into the third Hokage. Iruka looked over Naruto for a second and before nodding. "Very good, Naruto. Now drop it and perform the substitution when I throw this rubber kunai at you." He held up a black rubber kunai for Naruto to see. Naruto nodded and dropped the illusion. He looked around quickly to pick his target. Iruka waited a second and then threw the kunai at Naruto. When it hit, Naruto poofed into smoke, and when it cleared, it revealed a chair. Iruka turned around and saw Naruto waving at him from one of the desks. "Well done. Now please put the chair back and come do the clone jutsu." Naruto smirked and substituted himself with the chair again, earning a small smile from Iruka. "You need to create 3 clones to pass, Naruto." Sensei, did they have to be regular clone?" Iruka raised an eyebrow at the boy and looked somewhat confused. He found it hard to believe a student could do a higher level clone technique. "You know a different one." Naruto decided actions were better than words and put his hands in the ram seal sign. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. 3 copies of Naruto appeared in the room and all smiled and waved at Iruka, who looked at them with wide eyes. A student was able to use the most powerful clone technique there was, even he was not able to make shadow clones. He looked on in shock as the clones disappeared and Naruto waited for him to start speaking. Sensei, do I pass or not?" Iruka shook his head to snap out of his confused state and pulled a headband from the desk drawer, then tossed it to Naruto. "You pass, Naruto, congratulations." He smiled as Naruto caught the headband with a huge grin on his face. Faster than he could see, the boy shot out of the room with a loud yell of victory. Iruka chuckled as he got up to retrieve Ino and finish out the day. Naruto bolted outside the doors into the training grounds to see a large gathering of parents talking to each other and his fellow classmates. Some of the parents gave Naruto nasty looks, but he shrugged it off and started to head towards his home to tell Hayate and Yugao the good news.